Chapter 19, Partaking of the Bovine. Frick's big plans included franchising tobacco shops all across the galactic rim that would feature both his pipe tobacco and Cuban cigars. He was also partnered up with the Church of Elonian Times to hold services in a building adjacent to the tobacco shops. I asked him, "What's with the church connection?" "I don't see the need for the partnership. You should do fine just selling your tobacco products without any kind of partnership." Here's my thought process. I'm thinking as more and more dairy cows dry up, people will start looking for other avenues in which to find contentment and satisfaction. As a result, more and more people will start attending church in search of the intangibles in life. I'm betting that most of them will be looking into the Church of Elonian Times. After all, in the modern vernacular, it's cool and in tune with the zeitgeist. Frank paused a moment to take a sip of coffee. "But what's that got to do with tobacco shops?" I was actually a little perplexed. "Come on, Nick. You're a veteran TPE, a man who's been around the block. Isn't it obvious?" "No, it's not." I was growing impatient. Frick was usually succinct. A benevolent dictator has to be when dealing with his subjects. But tonight he was in a very expansive mood. "Don't you know that everybody loves to go shopping after attending church?" I almost laughed, but was able to stop myself from doing so. I didn't want to hurt Frick's feelings. At that very moment, Captain Molly and her group of comedians entered the restaurant. I watched them as they walked to the front counter and placed their orders. As they were streaming by our table to find one for themselves, I asked Captain Molly to join us for a few minutes while her food was being prepared. When she sat down, I said, "I think you and Frank Fontaine, the benevolent dictator of Far Utopia, know each other." "Quite well," she responded. "We Syrians pride ourselves in being on good terms with all the successful business leaders in our galactic sector. We go way back. In fact, she was a freshman at the Syrian Space Academy my junior year," Frick said. "That's right. How forgetful of me. You're a Syrian too," she exclaimed. We all had a good laugh. I then asked Frick to fill in Captain Molly on his plans to sell Cuban cigars as well as the proposed partnership with the Church of Elonian Times. After Frick finished going over the details of his new business venture, Captain Molly responded in the usual straight-to-the-point Syrian style. "I have to tell you, I love the idea of transporting Cuban cigars all over the galaxy. It should be a great moneymaker for all involved. But I'm not sure about the church idea." "Oh, really?" Frick was having trouble hiding his disappointment. "I don't mean to be overly negative about it, but I believe honesty is usually the best policy. The Syrian Department of Advertising and making the most of any economic situation, and a group in which we Syrian insiders call the Bernaysians for short, did a detailed, no-holds-barred 300-year study of what people do after they leave church, and the findings were quite profound." What exactly were they, Frick? Frick seemed almost afraid to ask. 95% of churchgoers like to go straight home after church, have Sunday dinner, preferably a pot roast with carrots and potatoes, then sit around and watch whatever sport is currently in vogue, and fall asleep in the lazy boy. "Oh, well," Frick replied in somewhat somber tones, "I've still got the Cuban cigars." Chapter 20, Private Eye on Safari. There's only one real city on Finest Colombian, and even it is more of a town than a city, and even though it wouldn't normally qualify for one, it does have a spaceport, and that's solely due to the fact that the planet, formerly known as the Coffee Plant Planet, exports one of the most desired products in this corner of the Milky Way. That is, finest Colombian coffee. The name of the city, or town if you prefer, is Ernestine, and is the administrative center of the planet. Outside of Ernestine, the planet is mostly a wild and savage place, except for the shambas or plantations, like the one belonging to Phineas Cope, but they are relatively few in number when compared with the size of the land masses. Meanwhile, the dogs and cows run free. This could well turn out to be my toughest and most aggravating planetary inspection tour. I'm required to turn into CDC/ACME a pre-inspection report estimating how long an inspection tour might take. For Finest Colombian, I submitted with humble sincerity the following estimate: at least 100 years. On a cool Tuesday morning in the month of May, I went to the FCDC, Finest Colombian Dairy Commission, headquarters, and met with my initial safari team who were scheduled to work with me for at least 5 years. After that, I would get a new team. The revolving door would go on for as long as necessary, hopefully no more than 20 times in all. Representing the FCDC was Stalwart James, whose rather impressive title was Pharmacist to the Cows. The third and final member of the team, Fleetwood Jack, would serve as our guide. Both men looked strong and healthy, and frankly would have to be to undergo the rigors of the march. With our backpacks on our backs and our boots on our feet, we said goodbye to Ernestine and went blithely off into the surrounding jungle, which not surprisingly began almost as soon as we left the town limits. Our first destination was Riff Raff Valley, which was about 50 miles west of Ernestine and should be no more than a 2 to 3 day journey. As we hiked along the rutted trail, the red mud sticking to the bottom of our boots, we saw monkeys hurtling through the trees, stopping every once in a while to gawk at us. Snakes were abundant, but Finest Colombian was one of those rare planets that was fortunate not to have any poisonous snakes, so we paid them no attention. The wind was playing tricks on us. It seemed to be blowing in 2 different directions at once. I asked Stalwart if he knew what was going on. He explained to me that I wasn't crazy. Finest Colombian was the only planet in the known galaxy, in the known universe for that matter, where the wind blows in 2 different directions at the same time. Locals call it a wind-wind situation. Chapter 21. Earnest endeavor. We made camp 30 minutes before sunset. This gave us time to set up the mosquito-resistant tinning, as well as find some firewood before it got too dark. That night's meal consisted of warmed-up claycaco and decaf coffee. For dessert, we had what looked and tasted like pistachio nuts, but what weren't. It was one of those times I didn't have the energy to find out exactly what I was eating. It wasn't that cold a night, so we let the fire die out. I did wonder if any dangerous animals were in the vicinity, but neither Stalwart nor Fleetwood Jack appeared to show any concern, so I decided to go with the flow. We were all exhausted. I estimated that we covered 25 miles on the daytime march. If things went well tomorrow, we should reach the Riff Raff Valley. I was asleep almost as soon as my head hit my folded up jacket serving as my pillow. Sure enough, I dreamed. I was sitting on a log in a swampy area. I was staring at a lagoon that was punctuated with cypress trees whose limbs had hanging gray moss. I was dripping with sweat, and the air was heavy and laden with a sense of doom. And then I realized sitting on either side of me were my grandfather Nick and my father Nuke, but they weren't quite solid. They seemed to be slightly transparent, and a faint light appeared to be passing through their torsos. Then in unison, they said to me, "You can do it, Nick. You just have to believe." Then it struck me that there was an object at the bottom of the lagoon, and they were telling me to use my willpower and lift it out of the lagoon. If they believed in me, I could believe in myself. And then I pointed my right hand at the lagoon, and my MPV rose slowly out of the water. I deftly maneuvered it to a spot on more or less solid ground. and then the dream ended. Next morning over breakfast, I didn't say anything about the dream. It was a little too personal to share with people I just met the day before. We broke camp and continued our trek toward Riff Raff Valley. Soon we were walking on a narrow ledge that ran alongside a long series of high cliffs. The sun had broken through the clouds and it had gotten quite warm. Below us were fields of light high grass and stumpy trees that were without leaves and resembled scarecrows in an abandoned cornfield. Everywhere we went, we saw the tracks of wild dogs. According to Fleetwood, these dogs were mostly friendly, but in times of hunger, they could turn nasty. Late in the afternoon, using my binoculars, I spotted a lone cow drinking at a small pond of water. Before we could get close to it, it had scampered off into the nearby forest.